The first couple paintings that I worked with this season at the watermill when we did our two paint-alongs dealt with color. And this painting actually deals with edges. There's muted color, which is really fun. There are no people, so you don't have to worry about painting people. It's a lovely garden, a Mediterranean garden. It's a friend of mine's home in Spain, in Barcelona, and I actually have spent time there. So I love the place. It's very special to me, and I hope that comes across in the painting. What I wanted to show you with opening up the here in front of you is an array of things. I usually open up with a what you would consider a cluttered workspace because I like to show you things as you're coming into the picture rather than a lot of white space. Um, the picture that we actually are doing today is called the Secret Garden. And the Secret Garden is really a garden in Barcelona. I think in our cluster there are pictures that I have. This is the one that you have. That's your demo picture. This is another one, another shot that I have, which shows a little bit backed up from here, and that's the floor of the kitchen looking out into the garden. So really what we're doing here is we're painting from a dark space into a light space. And that's one of the things that I think that's most important about this piece. Um, we're surrounding a really interesting textured and light-filled area with a lot of dark surround. And as you can see in this painting, this is this is the one of the versions that I painted also of this piece. You can see that the whole piece relies on the fact that there's a dark surround. This is another version of it in different colors. And then really a unfocused sort of area down here and a very focused table and chair and pot of flowers, if you like, in the back, whatever you like, that's a little detail in here. You can also see that I've done this piece as a pen and ink. And this is another one that's really fun. And why I'm showing you this is because there are many different ways that you could take the image that I'm showing you and actually then do it in different versions. So this one is done with drop-in color, which is extremely uh, kind of modulated and blurry, and then gone over with pen and ink. I've also done this piece. I'll show that right here. I've also done this piece as a small gouache. So as you work with this piece, today you might paint it with me, and then afterwards you might try to paint it in different variations. This one has a lot more precise lines. Of course, gouache is a opaque watercolor instead of a transparent watercolor like we're doing today. So this one actually has a lot more of the hard edges because of the consistency of the paint. But this is another fun way to kind of work with your pieces. I also, if that wasn't enough, I've also done this as a print. This one is a print that I've then hand colored with watercolor. So I really, within my own artwork, I like working in a lot of different mediums and also using watercolor kind of as a basis for things and then adding things like ink or gouache or a print over top of the watercolor. So this is an image that you could do many times for yourself in many different color combinations. Okay, let's get started. Take this away. What I'm going to start with first is, and what I want us to focus on, we're going to move this over. Let's bring this over here, get this over to the side, and bring my palette over. There we go. You're completely on camera. And I've got a little bit of water pot right here, so you'll be able to see my when I dip into the water. One of the things I wanted to show you, particularly with this piece, is that when you start off and you have your black and white drawing, one of the things that you can do for yourself, and I've shown you in a couple other demonstrations coming up to this one, is once you have your sketch or your printout that is in the cluster, you can also work with the idea of the value plan for this. And here I've actually done the value plan. And some of you have seen me do it with a large pen, with pen and ink, with a marker. But this is a super fast way to think about it. And I'll show you really how this is done. We'll turn this over so I don't get anything on the paper. Uh, I've got my sketch here. It's simply my printout. It's on a piece of regular paper. And I'm going to take a little bit of dark pigment. I've got something on a separate palette here. And I just want to show you really quickly, very, very fast. Let me get a little bit of dark here too. Got a little in my palette. How we can actually go around this piece and cement in our minds where the interest is in this work. And as soon as I do the wraparound, you can kind of see it right here, of this door, look at what happens. That pops right out. I also then can let some of those darks join. The chair is going to be fairly dark. We're going to come in and do the checkerboard of the floor. I always get a little off on that, thinking, which checkerboard do I put the brush into? There we go. And there's dark here, and then we're darkening over here. So this is not a complete value study, but what happens when we work this way is we suddenly get an idea of where we're going to place our darks and mediums and lights. The other thing we want to think about is there's going to be a dark area right behind the white table and the little pot of flowers, which is going to pop that out. And then the other area that's going to be dark or darker is going to be up in here. See how fast this goes with a brush? This is a wonderful way to start any painting. It gets your head into the idea of where you're going to really put your emphasis. And we can bring that down a little bit here. And that really gives us then the idea, we look at this piece again, that the dark is a surround. There's dark behind the lamp here. There's definitely dark behind the pot and the little table here. And then the rest of this is really very blurred out. So if we're looking again at the picture, you can see that that's really what's going on in the picture. We're really looking from a dark space into a light space, and that's the illusion that we have here. So I hope that gives you a little bit of an idea of where we're working today. We put this aside. That's a great thing to work from. And here's our finished piece. So it gives you the idea of the darks, mediums, and here I've gone in actually afterwards and I've put more paint into these areas to remind myself that the lamp, the surround up here going into the corner, and these objects that are on the table with the heavy shadow, we can put a little more shadow on, lost a little shadow in there, with the heavy shadow, are really going to be quite dark. And then this is going to be all light. So let's get started. Okay, I've spritzed all my colors and my board is slightly tilted, just a little bit up. Let's see if I can get a little bit more light on this, tiny bit more. There we go. And your paints should look very glistening. I posted my palette on the cluster site and you can see here, just put this over. You can see here that everything is kind of very, very wet and ready to go. The brushes we're using, I'm going to be using a squirrel brush and a number 14 synthetic brush, my detail brush, and probably a square brush if you do have it. If you have it, great. If you don't today, that's okay. I could be going back and forth between this larger squirrel size brush and the smaller one, but I think maybe the smaller one will work today for what we've got. And I do have another detail brush, which is great for small lines. We may or may not need that today, so I'm going to put that to the side. Let's move this over here just real quick. Move this over. There we go. Okay, so we're ready. We're going to start with color in the background first. We are going to go into a little bit of cerulean blue, if you have that. With a wet brush, we have a dry paper now, and we're going into our cobalt blue. So cerulean, cobalt, and just a tiny touch of a cool red. Nothing much, just you're just mixing a bluish kind of a blue mix here, but with just graying it down ever so slightly. And the first thing we're going to do is go into the top here and go into our sky. Now, we're carefully going to paint around the white of the lamp and pull this all the way down. We're working on dry paper. Don't worry about overpainting anything here. You're going to have green that's going to go right on top of here. But carefully, we're going to go around our lamp. I think I got a little bit on there. And we're going to pull all the way down. We're going to pull all the way down. Brush on the paper, brush on the paper. One of the things with watercolor that you can think about is keep your brush on the paper as long as possible rather than lifting and putting it back down. Now we're going to go around my little pot and we're going to trim around the chair and the table, which is white. So we're going down here. Don't worry if it does go over on it. We can fix some of that with our white gouache. Now you're going to switch over because we're going to bring some color down into this area as well. And as long as this bead is here, this little line, and if my paper were tilted a little bit more, you could see that the color is all running down here. We're going to go into a little bit of yellow ochre. So we've got our cool pot here, and we have yellow ochre here. I use Sennelier yellow ochre. I really like it a lot. You can put a tiny bit of New Gamboge into it, which is a yellow to make it a little brighter, but my yellow is nice here. Looks dark on camera. And we are going to bring that down. Get my brush a little bit cleaner. We're going to bring that down right around the stem of the table and down into this area just slightly. Okay. Now I'm going to have you do something with this edge at the bottom. Okay, so you've painted down to here. You're going to wet your brush, rinse it, tamp your brush lightly, and then you're going to take and actually just fuzz the edge of that color and just let it pull down ever so slightly. Your board is slightly slanted, so it's going to run a little bit that way. You're trying not to introduce water back up into this wash, but you're pulling that down so there's a little drift, and this is going to be a fuzzy line in between there. There you go. Okay. So we're doing okay so far. Let me just clean up a little bit of water that's pushed down here. Okay. Next thing we're going to be doing is we are now going to mix up our dark. So we've got, this is going to stay a little bit dry. I'd like to put the dark in here. Actually, I think let's mix the dark and then wait for this to dry ever so slightly. So we are going to take one section of our mixing area here. We're going to take, I would say, ultramarine blue, and burnt sienna. So ultramarine blue, burnt sienna. If you don't have ultramarine, you could use Prussian, but it's a little dark. And if you don't have either of those, you could use cobalt, but will not make it quite as dark. We want it to be a warm but really dark, dark. Okay. And it should be on the bluish side. So I'm not real sure how this looks on camera. Should be on bluish. If it doesn't look blue enough, put a little cobalt into it. So that's okay too. So we have ultramarine blue, a little bit of burnt sienna, and a tiny bit of cobalt added in there. Okay, so we're going to be bold here. We're going to go in and we're also going to be using our brush sideways. So this is rather important. In this particular painting, this painting is a lot about edges. And I want to show you if you, as we go, how to do different edges. But I also want you to complete those edges within our painting, putting a little more cobalt in there and get a little bit of a base for what we're going to be doing later. So we're going to go all the way across the top. Now, if you have those, let me move this down just ever so slightly. If you have those kind of skittery marks, that's great. Load up on your brush. Leave a little white line here, so don't complete going down to the blue. We're going to go around the side. You're going to go around the door. See how I'm pulling down? And I've got these textural marks. They look a bit crunchy. My brush is flat on the paper. We can, if we run out of the color, we can make a little bit more. Again, that's ultramarine blue, a little bit of burnt sienna, and cobalt. We're going to push around here. We're also going to avoid this door. So we have two doors that open here. You can see here, we're going to be going down this side and all the way down, and we're actually going to be going over top of the lamp. Don't worry about it. Just go sideways with your brush. I used to tell my students in class, don't paint sideways, always pull your brush, until I found that you can really get some wonderful, wonderful textures. I wasn't painting with enough textures in my paintings, and I think that really has changed for me when I start using my brushes in different directions. And we're going to pull up here. Okay, so we've got these really textural marks here, and that should look, let me show you just very quickly. That should look like this when we're done. It'll give that feeling of light and shadow. Let's go back in. We've running out of a little pot. I didn't quite make enough here. Ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, and a little bit of cobalt. And we're also going to come in here and we are going to bring in a dark on the top here and leave a little bit of white line, just a tiny bit. Now this one can go fairly flat. And as it meets the blue up here, it should stay fairly sharp on that edge. Now we're going to do something that we could have done earlier, but I think this will make the piece more exciting. We're going to rinse our brush, tamp our brush, get it rather clean. Make sure it's a little bit clean. And then go back into our yellow ochre, our little yellow ochre pot. So really here on our palette, we have three different pots going so far. We have a cool pot, which is a bluish. We have a yellow ochre pot here, and we have a dark. So we're going back into our yellow ochre, and we're going to be pulling down in this area here where the windows are. These are the large glass doors that open up onto the patio. Now, you're kind of wondering, well, it's wet at the top. We want that. And we want that to pull down here. And we want this to merge into this edge. Okay. So how many edges have we done here? We've done quite a few edges. And we're going to pull that one down. That can go actually all the way down. Don't worry about it kind of overrunning onto that area. But this area here where this is bleeding back into the yellow, let that happen. That's great. We want that to be a little bit fuzzy. So we have a crunchy edge or a rough textured edge. We have a blended edge here. And then we have a graded edge down there. So those are three different kinds of edges that you can do in your watercolor. We're going to go back into our dark pot here. Okay, don't worry about there being some yellow on your brush. Just go right back into your dark pot, which was the ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, and a little bit of cobalt. And we're going to pull that area down right here. There we go.
Buenos días.
Okay. All right. So we've got a lamp over here, and we are going to start now putting a little bit of dark. Now we've got a piece where everything's still dry down here, and you have these sharp edges, but you have some darks here. We're going to switch over on our brushes because I'm going to get a little bit more detail with my synthetic brush. So let's switch over there. I'm going to go with my number 14. And now we're going to be having some fun down on here. We're going to do something first. I think we'll do something first. Let's see how wet it is. We will do something right up here first. We're going to make one other pot of color. We'll move this aside. And as this dries slightly, kind of work on those edges just a little bit. We don't want to have any sharp edges showing there. I'm not a big blotter with watercolor, but sometimes you have to come in and take a little bit of color off if you don't want something to have a too sharp of an edge. Okay, we're going to make one more pot of color, and this is the most important pot, really. It's the green pot, which is this area up in here. If you can see what's happening in this painting, this has kind of blurred. This has gone a little bit, we're going to do this later, but this surround now is still a little blurry and a little crunchy. We're going to start working on our greens and our lamp. So let's make our green pot while this is drying ever so slightly. We're going to go in with, I believe this will be it dark enough. We're going to go with ultramarine blue. If you have a darker blue, something like a Prussian blue, you can add a tiny bit of that to it. But we want a nice, beautiful green. And we are going to then we're going to rinse our brush, tamp our brush, and go into our new gamboge or one of your yellows here. And we are going to make a nice pot of green. It looks fairly dark on my camera, but it is a nice green. Let me bring that up closer to you. See if you can see that. You see that a little bit better? There you go. A lot of folks will say, well, you have to rinse your brush every time you dip into your colors. I don't do that actually. My colors do get a little murky when I'm finished painting, but then I simply can rinse the tops of the colors and get them back to their original color. We've got a nice green here. I'm going to take a tiny bit of burnt sienna and put in there. So we have ultramarine blue, new gamboge, and possibly a little bit of Prussian to make that dark. Okay, and we are ready. We are ready up here. We are going to go in and around this particular light. So carefully, we're going in here. Load your brush. Your paint should be, as far as consistency, your paint should be about, I'd say, coffee to milk. So it's going to be a little bit heavy and slightly dark. And we're going to pull a clean edge right up to the edge. Don't worry if it gets a little bit damp here. What we're looking to do here is to go really carefully around the white light. And that blue can be a little help to you because it'll give the illusion of a little bit of shadow on that white light that's in the garden. And we're pulling around here and pulling down. Now, don't go too far. Okay. Here's where we're going to come in and do a little bit of fun here. We are going to turn our pointy brush. We can, if you have enough room, you can turn it sideways and you can work this way. We're going to bring some of the leaves with a few sky holes, what they call sky holes, down here. So try not to paint this completely. Turn your brush a little bit, bring that down ever so slightly. Those are our leaves coming down into the background. And we want that diagonal here so that if we remember in our black and white, this is coming down slightly at a diagonal here. And a few sky holes. You'll hear people in oil painting classes talk when they paint landscapes, talk about the sky holes of for landscape painting. And one of the things that's interesting is that usually a sky hole, if you are painting that in oil painting, you have to add color to your little omitted area, make it bluer because it will not look like a sky, which I think is interesting in oil paint. Watercolor, you don't usually have to do that. Okay, we brought these down and bring that slightly diagonal. There you go. Great. Now we have a sharp edge here. We have a little bit of a blurred edge here. And we're going to do one thing here. So I'm going to take my synthetic brush. I rinse my brush, tamp my brush. We're going to take out one bit of color here. So we have a thirsty brush. We're going to go right across this area here and pick up some of that color. Just lighten this ever so slightly. There you go. I think we got a little bit of a shine on that. Let's see if we can move my light ever so slightly. That might be a little bit better. Okay. Now we've got a dark here. This can be sharp, that's okay. We have a dark here. We're going to go, we've already done our lifting here. We can lift, well, I don't think we'll lift anywhere else. We'll just keep things as they are right now. We're going to go into our darks right now again. We're going to go to our pot with ultramarine blue and our burnt sienna. And possibly a little bit of Prussian. And this is going to give us some direction. Sometimes as you're painting, you want to paint, what would I say? You want to paint your dessert first sometimes to give you a little bit of impetus in the painting. If you're working on a lot of background and you're not seeing any movement in the painting and you're thinking, okay, when am I going to get to the good stuff? You actually give yourself, one of my teachers used to say, you give yourself a little carrot. You give yourself a little bit of a kind of a interest to keep you going within the painting. So we are going to take this dark and we're going to put that lamp in because that's going to give us some interest in this area. And this is dry now. You can touch with a finger and see that that's dry. Okay. And we can also come down to this area. We're going to lighten that dark a little bit. We're going to add a little bit of water to that, and it can have a little bit more cobalt and a little bit more burnt sienna in it because it's still a dark that's going back and forth between being super dark and then being kind of a little bit lighter with a little bit of recognizable color in cobalt and a little bit of burnt sienna. So it has a kind of a mix in there. And we're going to paint around this area in here. Now, try to keep your brush moving and try to think, I don't need to paint every single thing. One of the things that happens in watercolor is you have what we call happy accidents. And those are, I've heard other artists say that those are really gifts because you can't achieve them any other way. So if you get an edge like that, where you just kind of you see that little bit of crunchiness there or that little oddness in the area, you will never get that again because this is the first time you've put that brush on the watercolor paper. Okay, so we are going pretty well here. Let's blur a little bit of our edge. We are going to take our brush, thirsty brush, dampen it ever so slightly, and we're just going to just touch the edge of the lamp ever so slightly. Let that color kind of bleed ever so slightly. There we go. See it running slightly? There we go. Okay. Now this dark actually kind of wraps around. So we're going to work on that in just a second. This is the edge of my table. We're going to go back into this area. And if we can, while this is still wet, up here should be still wet, we're going to take a thirsty brush again, and we're going to just go over this ever so slightly. Just take a few of those sharp edges out. Now, you're probably asking me why we didn't do that when we first started, because this was still damp and this was a wet area being put on here, and that would make that start to bloom and have some problems with the water going up into that area. So all we want to do is have this dry down here, blur that edge, and now we're actually going to go down and paint around our little table. So we're going to go back in to our green pot. Okay, got our green pot here. This is where it starts to get kind of fun. Let's put a little bit more new gamboge in that area so it comes a little bit lighter, a little bit more greenish, little yellowish green. And we're going to now paint carefully around this table. So I'm going to be pulling down my color here, and this is a tree that's coming down here, and this is a uh, garden background. There's a little fountain behind here, but this is all greenery and a wall that comes down. Again, let some things happen with the color. Just let it, let that edge be a little bit ragged. Let the brush do some of the work for you. If the brush wants to go a little bit sideways, that's okay. We're going to pull a little green behind here. And we're going to bring that green around the table. Always good to have a really pointy brush for this. And I'm painting a little bit smaller than I usually do for demo purposes with our camera. But that still should give me a nice edge. And I'm painting around this little chair here. We're just going to kind of work that in right here. Okay. Well, let's drop in a little bit of color. We're going to go directly into our ultramarine blue and our cobalt, and we're going to just put some color in there. Drop that into the wet area. Just drop that in. That's going to let it go dark behind there. Okay. Now we're also going to take some of that bluish and put it into our green, and we're going to just move that edge. I want this edge here to just be a little bit broken. We don't want these two to meet because there's sky here. We just want that to pull across. Now, if you want to, and you have a spray bottle, you could spritz this just one time, ever so lightly. And sometimes I'll take my finger and kind of push a little bit of the color around. Make sure you're not working with toxic colors like chrome yellow, anything that would be ingested through the skin. And you can work with a glove if you like, but you can get those edges really soft. Let's go in a second and take a look at those. Let's see if I can go in. There we go. Okay. Can you guys see what we have here now? Now these edges are really, really blurry in here, and it gives the feeling of a more distant space, which is kind of nice. Also, this is blurry here. We have to move this down for you to see. This is a little blurry right here. And the thing that's crisp is my lamp, but this texture is showing up now on the surround, which is very nice. Okay, we'll go out completely. There we go. Refocusing. There it is. Okay. Okay. So we're going to be pulling down now around this area. We're going to be working in my area here. We've completed a lot of this area here. Um, I think there is something we can do up in here, which is kind of fun. I would like you to get a uh, right behind the lamp. Let's put that in now. There's something kind of fun here. We're going to take a very light area of our dark, meaning we're taking some water and adding it to my dark pile, which is going to make a light gray. And I'm going to just take that and put that right behind here. This is a picture on the wall that's behind the door in the kitchen. It's the kitchen looking out into the garden. And we're going to take a little bit of that gray and put a tiny bit of that around the outside there. Blot it slightly. So that's the illusion of a framed piece on the wall. Just the illusion. Just like you would kind of just notice it if you were walking into the kitchen. There we go. Now, in that wet area, you're going to put one little teeny tip of color, and this is going to be kind of unusual. So if you have a bright red or an orange, you're going to take that and just float that just lightly into there, just ever so slightly, as if this were a picture that you're not quite sure what the image is back there, but you're just putting that in. Now, again, that's dealing with edges. So we've got a edge here that we modified, and now we have another sharper, darker edge. And now we have no edges at all by putting heavy paint into an already wet area and letting it bleed. So that's really that's called mingling and also charging. So you can put that color right in there. And we are going to now take some of our dark And we're going to actually add quite a bit of blue to it. And I want you to add cobalt blue or cerulean blue. So it's going to go past its dark color. It's still going to retain its dark color, but it's going to go a little more bluish. We want it to be a little more bluish and a little more purplish as we go to the bottom here. So we are going to now go into this area right under the table. This is the edge of the table. We're going to go down here. Let's see if I can push that up a little bit. Now, because the chair is still in dark, we're going to paint the chair in with that dark area. There's going to be no separation between that shadow and the chair. And we're painting that around here, letting that connect. One of the things you want to think about in your watercolor are connections. Putting a little bit more cobalt blue and a little bit more burnt sienna in there. So this connects to this, and then this is actually the silhouette of the chair. One leg coming here, another here. So there's a tiny bit of perspective here. Let me move that up ever so slightly. Can you see that? And we're going to let that, this is going to be one of our areas down here. It's a little bit of shadow. And we're going to move slightly up into here. We're trying to connect this whole area. We're going to come down on the left side of this container. Add a little bit more cobalt blue to it. And we're going to pull that shadow out all the way to the edge of our paper. Okay. And we're going to add some real blue into that, either cerulean or cobalt, to differentiate that ever so slightly. So it's going to go a little bit bluish. All right. We're going to do the same thing with this little guy right here. So we are going to take a light bit of that color. We're going to go, this is closer to the light. So we're going to come down and go on this side here, come across. And then that shadow from this particular canister is going to connect really to my chair. Okay. And that shadow is going to also connect across to here on this edge. Okay. Now, to get these a little bit fuzzy, we are going to now spritz ever so slightly in this area. Just spritz lightly, and that's going to make some of your edges move and mingle just a little bit. See what's happening down in here? It's kind of fun. And we can spritz a little bit more down in here. Some artists call this the kiss of life. Kind of a fun term. Okay. All right. And we are actually going to come up with a little bit of a lighter area. We're going to take one corner of our dark. Let's rinse our brush, tamp our brush. I have this really well saturated washcloth that's underneath my pot. I try not to use a sponge, but I have this washcloth which you would never take anywhere, or flannel, as they say in the UK, that is just it's my tamping cloth, and I'm going to put a little bit of burnt sienna onto that edge of the dark. And we're also going to bring that dark, we're going to move that dark up here on the edge of the table. And we're going to put a little bit of cobalt blue into that, or cerulean, because as it gets towards the light, it's going to go a little bit lighter. And see how that's now directing everything towards our garden. Okay, and we've still got our yellow down here. All right. This looks like a little bit of a sharp edge. We can kind of modify that ever so slightly with a bit of a brush, just twizzle it ever so lightly across there. And if you want to take some uh, color like a cerulean and pop it into here as well to give it a little bit of a different sort of color, that gives it a really nice feeling. I'm going to spritz this one more time. When you spritz, you get a really nice fuzzy edge. Here's my fuzzy edge. Almost looks as if it's, I don't know how many of you used to use SLR cameras, but when you focus and unfocus on something, you get that idea here. And I used to love that when I shot that type of photography, where you have something that's very sharp contrast, and then you're allowing your darks to go into a very fuzzy contrast. So we are ready for now for our checkerboard. So we've done a pretty good job up here. We still have some darks here. We might spritz this ever so lightly, just going around before we do our checkerboard, just slightly, just to keep it just slightly damp, tiny bit. Okay. Don't get it damp down here, just around so it stays damp in your paper. And now we're going to go into our checkerboard. So we start with our checkerboard. We're going to start actually at the top here. We're going to maybe use I think I'll still use this type of brush. It works well for me. This is the number 14. And we are going to go with cobalt blue into our dark pot here. Remember, I said this is going to be limited color on the outside here, limited color. And this dark, let's have that dark connect. We're going to start with a dark over on the corner here. And don't worry about them being really square little shapes. Or working with the diagonal. Don't worry about that. You're just connecting these pieces because we're going to blur them out afterwards. And we're going to have one here. And one here on the edge. Remember I said connecting the darks. This is going to connect to the side. And this is a dark here. It's a black and white tile Spanish floor. And it really is, this house is quite old. It's a family house in Barcelona, and it has the original flooring, which is this beautiful black and white tile. And we also are going to bring a little dark behind here. Don't worry if your checkerboards mix and match with what's going on behind them. Just will give you an illusion. And we actually have a checkerboard. We should probably bring one right in here. Bring that right over my chair. And then there's another one down in here. and one off the edge at the bottom. Let's make a little more color. Ultramarine blue. Now, as we get further away from the door, this can be a little darker. So you can do a little bit of ultramarine, more ultramarine blue, less cobalt, and a little bit of burnt sienna. You probably won't have any Prussian because Prussian's where we get it really dark over here. So we're going to go with a dark here. And our last tile, sometimes I paint sideways with my pointy brush, gives a nice little texture and a mark that you can't get any other way. And we're going to bring that tile down all the way to the base. Bring that all the way over. Remember, again, connections. There you go. Okay. So we are going to spritz this ever so lightly because we want some of those edges to be a little bit blurry. There we go. We're going to let that run just a little bit. See how it's moving ever so slightly. There we go. And getting pretty well set up here. So what we've done so far is now with these colors, and we are going to add something here. We've allowed the yellow that's underneath to kind of be a base for this floor as if the glow's coming into this room. Let's take a little bit of cobalt or cerulean and just pop it into a few of these tiles, just slightly. We're going to spritz that again. Not many, just a little bit. And we're going to spritz. There we go. Okay. And this should be fairly dry up in here. Okay. I think we'll wait to do this until the very end. But what I want you to do now, as we're working with this dark and it's on our brush and our cerulean and our cobalt is on our brush, is I'd like you to work with the shadow area under the table and watch your hand coming down on here. So you're going to get a light version. I'm going to just get a little bit on my brush here and I'm going to go sideways. It's kind of a gray now. And we're going to bring that underneath here and down onto there. And then our shadow of our table is right up here at the top. And we're also going to bring down some shadow shapes under a chair. The chair also has shadow under it. Just a little bit here. Just the illusion of the shape. Um, One of the things you want to think about too is as you're painting something, it really is the illusion of that shape. When we go to a museum and we see paintings, our eye is really making up a lot of that information of the paintings. We see a field of flowers or we see something that looks like a recognizable object, but really in essence, it's just the shape of the object. Let's go in here. We've also got that dark on the brush. We're going to go down the side here of the pot and just out ever so slightly across the table there. There we go. Don't worry about any of this. We're going to be putting in something with a little white gouache afterwards. It won't be a problem. If you've overpainted this area, don't worry about it. Don't worry about anything. We're painting. We have we're having fun here. Okay. I've got one little area that I want to kind of take care of that I still have a little bit of this gray on, and I want to bring just a little bit of color onto that vase and onto this vase edge here, just slightly, because I want it to differentiate from the table. And let's see if we can cut that top here, make sure that that line at the top of the table is nice and crisp. There we go. Okay, and now we've connected all our darks. We've gone from dark to here, to across, to down, into the tile, across here, going up. And so we're kind of scooting around in here. Um, One last thing before we go to the outside of the piece, we're going to take these two little squares you have here and just take a wet brush and go across ever so slightly. Not much, just the ledge of the door. Okay. Now, we're doing pretty well here. Okay. So we're taking our dark pot here and we're going to add, now we're going to lighten that pot and make it a little bit bluer. So we're going to use cobalt as our base because cobalt is a transparent watercolor, fairly transparent, and it's not going to impede a lot of things. If we use too much cerulean, that will go very opaque, and really can't glaze with cerulean, but you can glaze with cobalt, and you can also glaze with a cobalt and just a hint of burnt sienna and a tiny, tiny hint of a cool red in there just to make it go ever so slightly purplish, just a little bit. We're going to darken, let me move this down a little bit. We're going to darken the top here because this part of the room is very dark up here. So we're going to go with cobalt, a little bit of burnt sienna, and a touch of a cold red. Now that could be an alizarin crimson, it could be a quinacridone rose, it could be um, a carmine, any of those colors. Okay, and we're going to go right across the top here. Right across the top. We want that to be nice and dark. And we're not going to bring that down all the way. We're just going to bring it down just a little and sideways brush, and around the edge of the painting, just ever so slightly. Again, connecting with the lamp, just slightly. Oh, that's looking good. Okay. And you can take a tiny bit of burnt sienna and just pop that in across there as if there's some kind of beam or something at the top of the kitchen. Gives a little bit of interest up there. Pull that down ever so slightly. Can you guys see that? And again, cobalt, a little bit of burnt sienna, a lot of cobalt. Remember, this is our glazing color. We're not really charging. We are glazing now because things are fairly dry. And a little bit of that cold red in there. It's going to go just a little bit purple. Now, we've got a couple things on the right-hand side here. And let me just remind you. So if we look back here, let's take a second here. We did a little bit of the dark and light here, and it might be a little bit hard to see, but we've got a dark shape in here, which is probably a cabinet. We have a dark shape behind here, and we have a dark shape on this side, which really connects everything behind this door. So that's what we're going to be doing on this side. Remember, we put dark over here and brought it down to where the lamp is, brought it across here, and now we're bringing it down this side, but not completely. We're going to try to get the illusion of some objects that are in the background. Okay? So we're going to be bringing that down. That's some kind of cabinetry that could be in the background here. And then we're going to take a little break here. This is a diagonal. You might have gone over with your color here already. Don't worry about it. You just want that line to go up a little bit and bring that all the way down, and that's going to connect with the floor. Just a shape, just a shape. And again, we're going to make some more color here. Cobalt, a little bit of burnt sienna, and a tiny bit of that cold red, tiny bit. And we're going to bring in a little bit of a square behind here. Now, we don't know what this is. This could be another picture on the wall. There could be something hanging on the wall, something on the side here. If you want, you can bring another one just down here ever so slightly to connect with those darks here. Kind of take your brush and kind of bring it sideways across there. Start it maybe a little higher than this one. So we just have an illusion. And I'm going to put two little lines here. Okay. And we're going to spritz this. Again, we're going for blurred edges. If you stick with me right after this demo, I'm going to do a very short demo on 3 different kinds of edges that I talked about during this painting. And you might be interested in that. There are 3 different kinds that we've talked about, the blurred edge, the rough edge, and a smooth edge. And I'll show you how to complete all of those. But we're using all of those now, even though you probably think, okay, we, we're painting as fast as we can here. But I hope everybody's doing fine and keeping up. I think you guys are doing well. Okay. We're going to pull that. I'm going to drag that ever so slightly. And I like having, I think I'll bring a little bit more of that dark right behind there. And if we go to the corners of our paper, that can be really dark up there because this is the darkest part of the kitchen. And what we're doing is kind of creating that illusion when you're going from a dark space into a light space and you suddenly walk in and your eyes haven't had a chance to refocus, but you're moving from this darkness into the light. Okay. And we're going to spritz just ever so slightly. I have my little spray bottle. I was mentioning before we started that one of the things I like to do with my spray bottle is I have water in here, but I also put 2 drops of gum arabic, which you can buy in art stores, in my spray bottle, and it keeps everything moist a little bit longer. It's one of the things that I do when I spray my palette. I love having a little bit of gum arabic. It keeps everything very moist. Okay. We are actually doing very well. Let me see what time we've got. Yeah, we're doing quite well. Okay. We spritzed. I think we're doing fine. We're going to spritz a little bit more down in this corner. Now, the other thing to remember is also as you're working, your painting has a definite drying time, depending on what kind of paper you use and what kind of saturation of your colors you've got. But really what you want to do is you want to do all your changing and adding while your paper is still semi-damp. If I've had a chance to, uh, I've had to go away from the painting for a minute, something happened and I had to come back to it. I have even taken what's called cling wrap or saran wrap or plastic wrap and put it over my paper and kept the paper damp so that when I come back, the sheet is not completely dried out, because once your painting is dried out, you really have no ability to go back in and make those changes and make those blurs happen. It always looks like an addition to the painting, which you don't want to have happen. Okay, we're going to do something. Let's see how that's a little bit dry up in there. Um, we're good. We're good down here. I think we're doing fine. Okay. Now we're going to take our, let's take our, go back to our either squirrel brush or our soft brush, as long as it has a fairly good point. Now, this brush of mine has a pretty good point, and it also has a good, what they call the belly of the brush, and it loads well and works sideways, but also can point. So we want a brush that points. If you only have your synthetic brush for this part of the painting, go ahead and use that. We're going to put in the illusion of these doors opening out. And if we look at the painting again, or actually the references, you can see that this is a glass door with some shutters, and this is has some reflection on it, but it also has some shadow on it. And then the shadow really wraps all the way around here and comes slightly down on the door, and then the background is very light. So let's take a little bit of let's take our squirrel brush. It's going to be damp. We're going to lightly tip it in the water. We're going to go back to our pot of dark. Now, our pot of dark is probably pretty diluted at this time, and that's what we want. We want it to be just a light gray. See how light that is? The other thing I want to mention is I try not to do a lot of swirling on my palette. A lot of you have worked with different watercolor artists and different painters. If you keep mixing your colors on your palette, you will end up really eradicating the freshness of the color. So as little swirling as possible when you put your colors in there. And I know we've done it many times, but you don't want to keep mixing until it's really like a pancake batter is probably what I want to say. Okay, so we are going to start at the top. Now be brave. You're going to go down here. I'm going to show you, and then you can do it. We're going to take, we're going to make a slight shadow on the inside of this door. Just light. And we're going to do one on the other side of the door, but more controlled. One time, just down. Okay, just down. Now, what we're going to do from here is we're doing a little bit of perspective, because these and this angle, and these doors down here are going at this angle and this angle, so that we now have the ability to show that we're going away from this space into this next space. So we're going to take the tip of the brush, we're going to tamp our brush, and we're going to go up here with just a few marks. And as we get down towards center, they will be level with us because we are the viewer standing in the kitchen. This is our point of view right here. Okay. And as we come down to the bottom here, we have a couple little marks that come out. See how that door starts to turn? Same thing on this side, this way, and even here, and then across here, ever so slightly, and we can't see that other one here. Let's spritz those. And we're going to take, let's see what we got here. We're going to take a little bit of, I'm just going to say a little bit of blue, but I don't want to do that. Um, we're coming into the home stretch here, really. This is looking pretty good. Uh, I think what I'd like to do is I would like to soften these corners that are up here just ever so slightly. And we're going to soften them just with a little bit of a brushwork, just in the corner, just up there. We don't want that to be in focus. The only thing that's really in focus is out here. We're focusing back to this area, and we're having a little bit of our edges here. Okay, now we're going to do one other thing that you may or may not have the end of a brush. If you have your wooden brush, you can do this. If you have uh, a, a brush that has a sharp end, you can also go in here if you want to lift a little bit of this color and lift away a little bit of what you put down here if it's still fairly wet. There we go. It gives you the illusion that that is a window that's opening. Okay. All right. Now the colors are lifting to the top in the paper, and you've actually got a really nice area in your paper. Let's go in and do a little bit of detail. I'm going to go with I think now I'm going to start going in with my detail brush. So my detail brush is like my number 14, and this is a number 6. These are King Art. These are really nice brushes. They're not very expensive. You can get them online. This is a low Cornell. They don't make anymore, but they're very similar to the King Art brushes, and they have a very nice point. So now we're going to go in with a little bit of detail. We've got to make this darker behind here. That's one of the things we're going to do. So now we're going to go into our green pot again, which was over here. It's getting a little dry. We haven't been into it lately. And we are going to go with the Prussian blue, or if you have Windsor blue, and you can use a little bit of ultramarine blue, but Prussian is quite a bit darker. And we're also going to go into our New Gamboge, which is a bright yellow. And we are going to do a little, it's a very dark green. Now, how do we make that dark green not so bright? We take a little bit of our cold red and add it to that mix, and then the mix suddenly goes dark. So that goes into a deep dark green. Now we're going to go in with a little bit of detail. We're going in and around our table. So this area here is going to go very dark because this is a dense area behind the table, and it'll make the table really pop out. You could do a little bit of lines here. See how that dark that we mixed before for the chair is just kind of sinking in there? And you want this fairly level into the back. Don't worry if the chair doesn't quite look like a chair. It'll be the illusion of a chair. My chair is actually a little bit squiggly, but it gives you the illusion of the chair. Now that dark, we're going to bring up here. Now this is drawing a little bit lighter. So we're bringing that up and around here and allowing some of that green to the background to show, because that's going to work for leaves in our pot that we have here. We just want to make sure that these lines are crisp. And this is going to go up at a slight diagonal. Those of you who have taken classes with me before or been online with me know that when you put in a diagonal in a painting, it's going to be a lot more exciting than if you put in a real straight line across here. If we start leveling everything out, we're going to have difficulty with engaging the eye and making the viewer want to go back and look at things. And that's really what you want to do. You want that viewer to stay engaged with your painting, or you want to be engaged with your painting too. when I used to go to New York and look at the galleries, I had what I called the 10-second rule, which is you walk into the gallery and in 10 seconds you look from right to left. You can tell if you're going to stay in the room and look at the show. It really is either that or you walk out. You don't have to, you don't have to stay if nothing is engaging you. One of the things that really engages a viewer is tiny paintings. If you are have to walk across the gallery to see a painting, that really is a great way to get people to look at things. The smaller the art, many times, um, it will really intrigue you. Okay, we're doing pretty well here. We've got a nice dark here. We are also going to put, let's see what we're going to do here. We're going to spritz this upper part right here, our upper green area, so it's still not dry yet. And we're going to just lift a little bit with our detail brush. We're going to lift a little bit of that color out, just a little bit. Not too much. You're not going over the sky holes. And as we've lifted, we are going to take a little bit of New Gamboge on our brush, just a little light, and just drop that in ever so slightly. Now, New Gamboge is that beautiful yellow color. It's going to look like a little bit of hazy light in there. And with that little bit of New Gamboge and a little bit of that green, we're going to take that and put that onto the light as if the light has a little bit of reflection of what's going on in the garden. Because it wouldn't be completely white, would it? It would have a little bit of reflection of the green. If you get too much, just tamp it out. Okay, I think we're doing pretty well here. All right. So we are almost ready. Let's just check a few things here. We are almost ready for this area of the piece. Um, we're going to go with our other brush and make this just slightly, I don't know if I want to make it slightly darker. I'm going to make it a little bit darker here. We're going to go with our number 14 brush. Let's go back into our dark pot here and make it do our cobalt again. I'm seeing that this top area is drying a little bit lighter than I want it to dry. Okay. And I want a couple lines in here that create an area of interest. And I want this also above the door. I think I'm going to get rid of some of that white line there and right across here. Now with that brush, I'm going to go down ever so slightly and ever so slightly here. I like that better. Okay. And we are going to spritz. Again, that should look a little messy up here. You don't want this to be, this is where your solid area is going to be. This is where your solid area is going to be. This is all going to be the illusion. Okay? All right. Now we are ready, actually, I think, for getting pretty much ready for highlights. And that will be with white gouache. We're not quite there yet. Um, I think I'm actually going to dry this slightly now. Let me dry this just a little bit. Okay. All right. So we're doing pretty well there. I'm going to come in very quickly and show you. Let's go in just a second. I'm going to show you some detail on this. Over this over the side. Okay. See if that focused. That focused really well. I'm going to do this area with the camera being on detail so that you can see actually what I'm doing here. I'm only going to be working in this area. I'm going to be working a tiny bit up in this area, and I'm going to put a little bit of highlight on here. So I think now we're almost ready for our white gouache. The other thing that you might have, if you do have it, is a bright pink color. Now I'll show you what I've got. I have opera pink gouache and I have white gouache. If you have any pink color or you have carmine or alizarin crimson, you can mix that in with your gouache and create a pink. But I'm going to be using a pink gouache for my flowers, and that's going to go right on top of here. You can make your flowers orange, you can make them pink, whatever you like, but your bright moment is going to be right in here. So let me show you how we work with our gouache. I'm going to go in real quickly first. Hang on one second. Onto this top here. And when I work with gouache, which is, I like, my favorite is the permanent white, Winsor and Newton. I don't put it out on my palette, but I actually just go in with my brush, just like this. So my wet brush, and then go right into the gouache. You're going, that might wreck the brush. Well, you want a tiny enough brush. You want your brush to be tiny. And your white gouache should be fairly creamy, but not runny. And we're going to go in and we're going to just touch the top here. If for some reason your light got a little bit balloon-like and kind of didn't quite get around, this is the time that you can fix that. You can also bring in a little bit of the cord. Let me just show you that real quickly. I brought in the cord there towards the top. Okay. Now we're going in here to our chair, and I'm going to bring in a little bit of the chair here, just little bits of light. Now in this area, here's what I'm going to be doing for my flowers. I'm going in and I'm actually overpainting some of the areas that were dark. So the white gouache is just popping right in there. Don't have to paint it all. I left most of this white. You don't have to do it on both sides. If you have a problem with an edge, of course, you can go in and clean that edge up very, very nicely, very easily. Put a little bit of light on here as if there's some reflected light into that area. Okay. Now, one other area we're going to put light is an area where there's a little bit of light on top of this lamp. So we're going to put a little bit on here and a little bit on this edge. Just a little bit.
Another.
Guys, see that? And a tiny bit under here. Tiny bit. We're also going to put a little bit on top of this canister and a little bit on top of that canister. See how pretty that looks? Looks really nice. I'm going to do all this in detail, and then we're going to go out and I'm going to do something into the doors here. Okay. So you have your white gouache in here. We've worked a little bit of white gouache into here. Now I'm going to either touch my colors in my palette. I've rinsed my brush, tamped my brush, and I'm going to go and take a little bit of this pink. Now it can be, this is a very bright pink. Opera pink in either gouache or watercolor is one of those colors that I started carrying in the Mediterranean because it is really the color of bougainvillea flower. And we're going to put a little bit in here, and it mixes right into my white color. Doesn't have to be complete. You just want that little spot, little bright spot of color. If it gets too bright, you can put a little bit of green. Things get a little too flowery for you. You don't want it to you don't want to make the arrangement look too cute. You want it to be just this little, it's just a bright note of color. I'm going to tamp that down ever so slightly. There we go. As if that's a little moment you're walking out here, walking out into the room, or out of the room into the garden. Okay, we're going to come back out with our camera, get the full effect. Okay, see what we've got going here? It's looking really nice. Okay, and I'm going to do a little bit of white gouache. I just put my cap on that. I'm going to do a little bit of white gouache on the areas here on the door. So what you're doing now with your white gouache is you're looking to see what you're going to be doing. Um, I think I've got one thing I want to do, which I forgot, which I'm going to have to use I did forget that. I forgot my shadow down this side of the door. So let's do that before we go to any white gouache on the door. So I'm going to go with my number 14 brush, and it's a cobalty, it's that dark mix. And we're just going to be brave and go straight down, straight down. Let me put my brush down and I usually brace my arm, and we go straight down one time. And if you want to do that on the other side, you can bring that down slightly. We forgot those. And we can tamp them slightly so they have a little bit of an uneven quality to them. Or you can spritz them. Yeah, we want that to be fairly uneven. Okay, I think we did remember that. That was good. Okay, last little thing. We're going to go in here and we are going to go back to our white gouache. And now we're going to do a little bit of detail in the doors that open up. So we're going to go across here as if there was a reflection here. And then here we also did some lines before, but we want a little bit more. And then these go straight because they are at our eye level. Remember, going up this direction, a little bit less, straight across. And then as you come down here, these are going to go this direction. So we go across here. There we go. Same thing on this side, but maybe a little less. This is the darker side of the room, I think. So we just want maybe just a little guy there. That's maybe a little much. Right here, across. And then here we are straight. And then this is a little bit below eye level and going out of the picture. I think we're just about done. Let's hold that little side of the lamp over here. We can have a little bit of light on this frame if you want it, just ever so slightly behind here, as if there was some glass reflection there. If you lost your reflection here, you can pull that down ever so slightly. I think we're fine here. Let's check what we've got. Have just one more little touch area that we can do. I think we're just coming into the home stretch. Let's put our gouache away. Okay. We have one thing we're going to do on this area. There's a lamp that hangs down here on the side of the room. Okay. And that one, we have a little bit, the light is down on the table here, but that's a long hanging down light. And we've made the illusion of it here, but we're going to do a little bit more right there. So we're going to go back into our dark. This is our last little touch up. We can go with a little bit of ultramarine and our pot of burnt sienna. And we're going to do a couple things here. If we want to put a little Prussian in that, you can make it a little bit darker. We're going to go in here, pull this down ever so slightly. We're going to run this down here. Now, there are a couple ways to do that, and some of you may have trouble with just doing a light line. You can also use a ruler. At times, I have done this. You can take a ruler and kind of move your hand along this if it bothers you to go straight. You can turn your painting sideways, which is absolutely no problem. And you can actually, let's do that. That would actually be easier for everybody. So if you turn your painting this direction and you actually pull this, oop, maybe I'm worse at it that way. Let's see. All the way to the top. There we go. That was good. That was better. I didn't, I wanted to make it a nice line for you all. I was hoping I wouldn't have a problem with that. Okay. And we're going to do a couple little things here. We're going to go with one little line under the table right here, a little bit of detail there, and just a tiny bit under that area of the table where the base of the table hits the ground, and tiny bit under the chairs, just a tiny bit. This is our dark dark. That's going to dry super dark, and you can do a little bit under that side of the pot. There we go. That's not quite. And I think we're really done. I think we did okay. Let me sign it. I think we're just about right. Let me check everything we've got here. Um, I might want to, this is where our paper is still semi-damp. Not really, it's not at all wet. It's not shiny. There's only two little shiny areas here. I'm going to lift one thing on this area over here. So this is where you start looking at your painting as a whole and you think, okay, did I do everything that I wanted to do? Do I have all the darks and lights in the areas that I want them? I see here where this canister is starting to go into the background. The values are too close. And if we look at a value scale, this I usually bring out at different times when I'm doing my workshops. But for the most part, if black is the deepest value, white being the lightest value, we have all these gradations in between. If things get too close, you can see that when you jump from one to the other, it doesn't have enough presence. It won't show. You have to actually, if you want something to show next to black, you actually have to move down one, two, actually to the third value down that will create the contrast with the dark area. So the rule is if you want contrast in something, let's say you're over here in the light areas. If I want to have a area that shows up against an area that is that value, that darkness or lightness, I have to jump two more and go with this one to contrast that. So that is actually something to think about if you have a value scale. Let's move a little bit of this color out. Oh, that's better already. What I was just telling you about value applies to any kind of painting. And that's a great trick to think about. You have two jumps, two jumps, and then your value will actually pop against the other area. See here, it doesn't matter because we're against a completely light area. I think we actually did it. Let me sign it and see how we're doing here. Let me sign it with maybe I won't do anything quite as dark as we'll sign it with a kind of a bluish. There we go. And we will sign here. I think my signature is too great there, but it looks okay. And we're checking. I think we did okay. Maybe have a little bit of dark underneath here. Pull it that way. A little bit of dark underneath that way. I think we're done. How'd we do?